This is a Jewish krechts. This is in Yiddish krechts. And it doesn't matter where you come from. The Jewish sigh comes from within you very deep. It comes, this sigh comes from a very deep history that every one of you and every Jew carries on his own shoulders and within his own lungs. Oi, this is it. Shavua Tov, have a good week. And I must say that I'm very, very honored to be here and very, very, very excited to see your place here, which is really holy and sacred. Judaism is a very clever and very, very ingenious way of thinking, because it started something 3,000 and few other hundreds years ago called the narrative. Today, everybody is talking about what is the narrative. It's very modern to say, what is the narrative? The narrative is the story. And Judaism realized that if you don't have a story, you don't exist. In fact, you never know if you do exist or not. And it doesn't matter what age you're in. You don't really understand who you are and what you are and how do you look and what is within you unless you have a story. Now, if you holify the story, you make it sacred, you make it a part of living. And making a story a part of living 3,000 and many more hundred years ago is really a miraculous thing. No other religion in the world holified this story. But because of that, Jews are still Jews. And in the land of Israel, where there were the Amorim and Girgashim and Chittim and Yevusim, tribes, unbelievable big tribes, very strong tribes that lived there, no one knows who they are. No one knows what is their story. Who were they? The Philistines, Plishtim, that came from Knossos, from Crete. They ran away from Crete after a few hundred years of having peace, and peace in this case for them was really bad, because after having peace for so many years, they didn't know how to fight. And the Greeks of today just, took them over, and they had to flee out of Knossos in Crete. And they ended up at the very far shore, the land of Israel. Now, Plishtim, the Philistines, in those days, they were called Plishtim. They were giving a name, which was really a name that says that they were taking over. They were coming over to a land that is not theirs. Polshim, Plishtim. They were the most ingenious nation in those days. They were metal workers at the time where the Israelites were they didn't have a clue about metal. So with all this technology, with all this might that they came with, they didn't leave a story. And until nowadays, we have 5 cities of those Plishtim in Israel, Dagon and Ashdod and Ashkelon, etc. And we don't know who they are. Who were the Plishtim? Who were they? They didn't leave a story. Jews have left the story and lived within the story, and it doesn't matter where they came from. We all believe in a story, and that's why we are Jews. Not because we look the same, not because genetically we are exactly the same, and not because we are from the same tribe. It's because we believe in the story. We believe in a story. To believe in a story is to live it. And somehow when we believe in a story, we live the story, we become a part of a congregation that it doesn't matter where it comes from, it's all there. And what is the story? In Arabic, you say, "Kan ya makan o ala Allah al-tiklan." It happened or didn't happen, the answer is in the hands of God. That's what it says. It happened or didn't happen. Did or didn't happen. In English, you say, once upon a time. It doesn't matter when, once upon a time. But it's not serious enough. In Hebrew, you say, hayo haya. Hayo haya. Not only it was certainly there. It was there, it happened. Not only it did happen, it certainly did happen. Hayo haya. Two little words. And with this hayo haya, you can't argue. It's not just once upon a time, and it's not in the hands of God. It's in the hands of yourself. Did we have the Mount Sinai, the people can see the words? Ha'am ro'eh et hakolot. The people see the sounds. You can see the sounds when you are in the story. You don't only hear the sound. You can see it. We believe in it. Was there the Noah's Ark? Hayo haya. Of course. We believe in it. Was there Gan Eden? Was there Adam, Chava, the snake, Cain, Abel? All those stories? Yes, it did happen. And it's very strange because usually when you start religion, you started with the commands and with orders. And if you look at other religions, you see that it starts straight away with some orders. In the Jewish way, it doesn't start with orders. It starts with stories. The whole of the book of Genesis, Sefer Bereshit, is only stories. It's a shame I didn't write it, because it's such a good book. It's a fantastic book of stories. It's one of the best book of stories ever written. And it's a bestseller as well. And it takes you to such places that you are sure that it had to happen. It must have happened. It couldn't be that it didn't happen. And all those stories that go on and on and on until the point where the tribe of Jacob and his sons leave the land of Israel and go to Egypt. And there you are. It's the end of the story. No more stories. From now, we're starting laws and orders. And what is the first order? V'higadeta lebincha. This is the first mitzvah in the whole of the Torah. People think that the first mitzvot are in the Ten Commandments. It's not true. The first mitzvah in the Torah starts at the book of Shemot. V'higadeta lebincha. You have to tell a story. It's not just your right to tell a story. It's a must tell a story. It's not only, tell a story because you can enjoy it. You have to tell a story. It's an order. And why? Because now we are starting from V'higadeta lebincha. You tell your son and your daughter and your people that come after you, you carry on telling them stories. And what are the stories? About us. And everyone that tells the story tells it from his own very personal point of view. And then with 10 Commandments come in, the 10 Commandments, there are 2 words. Only 2 words coming. 2 words, 2 words, 2 words, 2 words, except one. כבד את אביך ואת אמך. כבד את אביך ואת אמך means, in a very simple way of saying it, is give honor to your father and mother. But it's not true. It's not giving honor. It's knowing your father and mother. You have to know them. לכבד is to know. And to know, you have to live them. If you live your father and mother, then you really are now getting the next thing, because that's the only commandment that has got a little tail in it. למען יאריכון ימיך. למען יאריכון ימיך, so your days will get longer, you'll stretch your life longer. It's not true. Again, the religious people think that if you do good with your father and mother, and you're really a nice boy, a nice Jewish boy, a nice Jewish girl, doing good things to you live longer. It's not true. You have to know your father and mother. You have to live their lives. If you live the life of your father and mother, then you really enlarge your life. It's not only from the day that you were born, it's the day that they were born. Now your life is much larger, and it's vast. It starts now from the day that your mother and father were born. And if you know the stories, and you lived the stories of your forefathers, then you really live forever. And if you have a story, and you live a story after you, then you never die. A person that didn't tell a story throughout his life, it's as if he was never born. A person that didn't leave a story after he's gone, it's like a person that never lived. You have to leave a story. And that is fantastic, because now it's the beginning of culture. A story is the beginning of culture, because it makes you listen. Because a good storyteller has to listen before anything else. And listening to each other is the beginning of culture. I saw the saying here, "Ve'ahavta l'ra'acha kamocha," on the wall of the temple here. You have to understand that telling a story is creating relationship between 2 functions, and it becomes a social art, a social way of dealing with each other. Now, slowly, it becomes a tool to create a group, and later to create a congregation, and later it will create a proper nation. When we know each other, we live together. When we tell the story to each other, we know each other. When we know each other, we live each other's lives. Now we're creating a nation. That's why the book of Genesis, Bereshit, is the basic route to create a nation. Believe in the story. And it's fantastic, because now within the story you create identity. When we go to our shrink, he says to you, "What is your story?" Nowadays, what is your story? Without knowing what is his story, and the word his story, history, it's his story. But in Hebrew, there are 2 words for history. There is sipur, and there is historia. In all the other languages, historia is a story. So it's not sacred. It's just telling what happened. But in Hebrew, it's the sipur. The sipur is the way of life. Now, how does anyone create his personal identity, especially when now we have 184 kind of congregations in Israel coming from all over the world? We have to know each other. We have to live each other's lives. And it's like people coming from all over the world and saying to each other, here we are, now what? How can someone from the Yemen, which is down south, relate to someone that comes from Bergen, from Oslo, or from other places in the north? How does an Iraqi Jew relate to someone that comes from England? And we have a lot of countries in one place. It's like we are creating a nation that it looks like a bird getting married to a fish. How do you do that? By knowing each other, by living the life of each other. But it's a long process. At the moment in Israel, we know a lot of the history of the Jews that came from Europe, especially from Eastern Europe. We don't know enough about the mid-European Jews, but we do know about the Eastern European Jews. It's very strange, but that's it. And people like me that are born in a day that in age without computers and without proper organizations, and with especially when the people that lived in a place that I come from, Iraq, how do I manage to create my own vision of myself? The first memory that I have, and we always go back to our first memory in order to create our story, is a white cloth, just very close to my face, and two legs, one near each ear, and a smell of a woman. Now, what is that? White cloth, too. What, do I remember the day that I was born? Impossible. What is it? When I find out later on, the white cloth is the inside of my grandmother's skirt. And the legs are my grandmother's legs. So what the hell am I doing in my grandmother's skirt? The year is 1949. Israel was just starting. In fact, at the end of 1948, we were already arranging to get to Israel. My father is a member of the Jewish underground in Iraq. And the Jewish underground in Iraq did a lot of work. And I am now in the dress of my grandmother on my way to Israel. But why am I inside her dress? The Jewish underground at the time didn't tell all the story to everybody. They just, they were the Mossad Aliyah Bet. It was called by then the Mossad Aliyah Bet. They didn't tell the whole story. They tell just, we called it midur. We call it the word midur, in other words, to just make parts and parts of the story. No one knows the whole story. And if someone is going to Israel on that event, he would know just in the last minute. So he won't tell each other. They won't tell anyone else that they're going, because it's very dangerous. And my grandmother was told, tonight you're going. And my grandmother was very worried about me because my brothers were already in Israel before me, in the kibbutzim. They fled because they were, again, members of the underground, and they were almost held by the CID, the secret police of Iraq. So they had to run away. And my grandmother knows that I'm there, the seventh son. She said, well, I'm going to take him with me. My father has to carry on working at the underground. My mother is pregnant and she's still with my father. And she said, I'm taking him. They said, just a minute. They told us by the Mossad that no kids under 10. No kids under 10. She said, leave it to me. No, it's very dangerous. Taking kids under 10 is very dangerous. This is a very, 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 very dangerous transport. If you take kids under the 10, you know, you get caught. And in those days, they hung people just like they were sacks of potatoes, you know. Every day, someone else being hung. But my grandmother said, he's coming with me. Leave it to me. But she was scared that the people of the underground will tell her no. So she put me under her skirt, and she went to the truck waiting for her. There, 2 o'clock in the morning, it's cold. And she sits on me, and they put all the, it's called the brezent, some kind of cloth that they put around the truck. Usually it takes about 16 people, maybe 18, and now it's about 34 people, one on top of the other, you know. And my grandmother is sitting on me, and then the truck's starting to move, and she's going, and she bangs me from there, and I started screaming, Now, in that darkness, and with all this fear, people looking at each other, say, where is the sound of this baby coming from? I was 3 years old. They look at my grandmother's eyes, and then they go down to her skirt. Now she doesn't have any other option. She pulls me out, and she holds me and says, now she speaks to me the oldest Yiddish in the world that came from Iraq. The first Yiddish in the world started in Baghdad, you should know. All those Europeans that think that they created Yiddish, let me tell you, 1,000 years before that, we created the Yehudi. Yehudi, which means Yehudi, Yi, it's Arabic. That is the language of the Jews. The language of the Jews, Yehudi, she said, so it's almost Hebrew. It's like Hebrew mixed with all kinds of words, local words, just like Yiddish with German. And I'm screaming, and now the heads of the underground were there. 3 heads of the underground were in this truck. And they look at my grandmother. I said, what did you do now? How dare you doing that? Don't you understand what you're doing? You were told not to bring kids under 10. And you brought us. What's the matter with you? Are you crazy? You want us to get killed now? You should be ashamed of yourself. Now my grandmother looks at him and said, how dare you speaking to me like that? Speaking to an elderly woman like that? Don't you have any Torah in your head? You should be ashamed of yourself speaking like that. You can't be Jews. He's 10 years old. Now they look at her and said, what? Yes, he's 10 years old. He's a midget. His father is a midget. His grandmother is a midget. I'm the only one that is like that, but he's... How? What do you mean, midget? Well, what can you do? What can you do? But he's crying like a baby. He said, well, he didn't develop. So I said, okay, shut him up, shut him up. Now, my grandmother tried every trick in the world to shut me up, but then she takes one of her, and she tries to milk me. In those days, we milked until the age of, getting the last tooth in your mouth. But my grandmother is my grandmother. What can you do? So I went on crying, and then that is my second memory. Took all the bags from the floor of the truck, and in this darkness, they put me down on this iron floor, and they put all the bags on top of me. And I remember the bags were made of blankets, because no one would go out with a suitcase in those days, because a Jew with a suitcase leaving Iraq, they'll be caught and then sent all the way back. So with all those blankets, this is the second memory. The blankets are pushing at my face, and those shoes with nails on them, because in those days we didn't have all those shoes with rubber. The nailed shoes, and then darkness. I don't remember anymore from that point to how come. But later on, I understand that my eldest sister says to me, you were once regarded as dead, I said, me? I'm alive, here I am. No, they thought we were dead. In other words, the truck, when they came in, they took the cloth up and they ran quickly. They said, come on, up, out. And they crossed the border. Come, go. And they come to my grandmother and says, come on. She said, where's the baby? Where's the baby? She says, the midget, he died. Come on. Leave him. What do you mean? What do you mean died? Even if he's dead, we have to take him to Eretz Israel. We will bury him in Eretz Israel. No. And she went back, and she saw me there lying on the iron surface, dreaming Zionist dreams with no problems. And she hugs me and goes, and we went to the other side of the river, which was, it's called the Arab Sea. On one side was called Arab Sea. The Persians called it the Persian Sea. It depends which way you look at it, but it's the same place. And it's the town of Abadan. And from there, we walked and went on all kinds of ways, part of it on a train, part of it on horses, part of it on... And I left Iraq when I was 3, and I was growing. We came to Tehran, to the Jewish cemetery of Tehran. And in the Jewish cemetery of Tehran, the British have built like an enormous wooden shed. And they put us all there with beds. And there we celebrated the first Independence Day. Shlomo Hillel, the head of the Mossad Aliyah Bet in those days, came to give the kids chocolate at the Jewish cemetery. And then a plane comes and we land in Lida Airport, which is now called Ben Gurion Airport. And in those days, there was just one track. The plane lands, and a lot of people come from all over the world. This one speaks Hungarian, the other one Romanian, the other one speaks Arabic, the other the Persian, and they all talk to each other, and they all understand each other. Nowadays, we all speak Hebrew, no one understands each other. And then the clerk there says, with stamps, and he comes and says, "What is your name?" "Victoria." "Now you are Yehudit. Go." "What is your name?" "Juliet." "Juliet." "Now you are Carmela." "What is your name?" "Elias." "Elias." "Now you are Eliyahu. Go." "What is your name?" "Salah." "Salah." "Now you are Moshe. Go." "What is the name of this?" "Yosef." 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 "No, Yosef." "Yosef." I stayed Yosef. I'm the only person in my family that didn't change his name. Everybody had different names. And I don't know why. Where did they get this idea of changing the names of people as soon as they arrive? People were so bewildered. They weren't around saying, "Excuse me, madam, maybe you could tell me what is my name?" And then the clerk says, "How old is this kid?" My grandmother holds me tight. I'm sleeping in her arms. I'm exhausted from all this year that been from Basra, Iraq, all the way here. "How old is it?" She looks at him, and she was told that children under the age of 10, they take them to the kibbutz. And she said, "No, we won't. I won't let him go to kibbutz. He will go to kibbutz. They'll take him. They won't bring him back." I know. And I took the responsibility on this child. He's 10. Now he looks and says, "What? He's 10. No arguments going on. He says, yeah. He writes 10. Everything could have been absolutely perfect, except for the age of 12, I got a letter and I've been told to be taken to the army. Now, people like me that were born in those conditions can never know what is the exact date of their birth. When people ask me, "How old are you?" I would just, create it or lie or just... When I couldn't lie anymore, I went to my mother that came after me, like 2.5 years. My mother and my father arrived, and we were living in a transition camp. You have to understand, Israel is the only country in the world that started from refugee camps. There weren't transition camps. They were refugee camps, but we didn't call them refugee camps. We called them ma'abara. Ma'abara in Hebrew comes from the word ma'avar, which means transition. But we never transit anywhere. There was no transition. The ma'abarot were from 1948 until 1964, and people lived in it, in tents. At the beginning, it was a tent that looked like this. And my grandmother and myself just had to, just crawl into the tent. Later, we got a bigger tent, which was called Indian tent. I don't know why. Maybe it came from India, but it was called Indian tent. And later on, it was sheds and all kinds of elements that you think of. How could that happen? But we are the only country in the world that started from refugee camps. 1.5 million people arrived in about 2 years. The first year, 1 million people arrived when the whole of the people of Israel were 500,000 people. We doubled them. A year later, another million. And it's crazy. There was no way to receive us because, no one thought that people who come to Israel after the war, didn't expect it. I wrote a book with Lova Eliav. Lova Eliav was one of the founders of Israel, and it's called Mishneh Evra Ma'abara, which means from the two sides of the Ma'abara. He was the one that created this thing, and we were very good friends. And one day I said to him, Lova, you know, when I arrived in Israel, I arrived when I was only 4 years old. He said, oh, I was 4 years old as well when I arrived in Israel, except I arrived in 1924. I said, well, I arrived in 1949, and I was 4 years old. But I lived in a small tent called Ohel Sayarim, which is army tent for two soldiers. He said, oh, I know this tent. I said, Pardes Chana. Pardes Chana is a small town not far from Tel Aviv. And I said, how do you know? He said, well, I was in charge. I started the Ma'abarot. I said, you did that? Listen, you have to tell me the story. What happened there? Why did you do that? And he started telling the story, and I told him the story of the inside of the tent, and he told me the stories of outside of the tent. And we sat for a while, and I said to him, listen, we're going to do a book about it. We're going to write a book together. And his wife said, Tanya said, writing a book is just like having a dream. You can't dream together. Everyone has got his own dream. I said, you're wrong. In art, you can create dreams together. Lova, from tomorrow, we're starting to work. I came to him and I said, look, here is the draft. Here's the lineup of the story. Let's work it out. We sat for 2 years. 2 years later, it came out. But again, people like me still don't understand how old I am. When was I born? So, you know, my mother, I came to her and said, Mother, when was I born? Now, once they could tell about your date of birth, if it was something really critical happened, like an earthquake, like a storm, like when they started a new regime, when something really went wrong. If there was no terrible thing that came exactly on your birthday, you got lost between the wedding of Auntie Simcha and the wake of Uncle Shua. You never know. So I said, Mother, when was I born? She said, well, you were born exactly. You were 30 years, no. You were 30 days. 30 days, exactly 30 days at the wedding of Auntie Simcha. I said, okay, Auntie Simcha, when did she get married? Oh, Auntie Simcha got married about a year before the Farhud. The Farhud was in 1941. Farhud was the first pogrom in Iraq. Jews lived in Iraq from the Babylonian time. Before it was called Iraq, Iraq was called by the British in 1921. It became Iraq. Before that, it was called Babylonia. And the Babylonian Jews lived for 2,600 years without any problems. They were the salt of the earth. And in 1941, the government of Iraq became Nazi. The Prime Minister of Iraq did a treaty with Hitler, and they were against the British in those days, so they did the treaty with Hitler in order to get the British out of Iraq. And the British just, they said, if you don't want us, to hell with it, we're going out of here. And the British have left Baghdad and left the main cities of Iraq, and the pogrom started. This is 1941. I said, just a minute. And if she was married and her wedding was just the year before that, that means that I'm already 12. So what am I doing on first grade? Something is wrong here. So I said, just a minute. Mother, could you tell me exactly what? Well, it was exactly. My mother was very exact. It was summer day. It was a day that we all fasted in the middle of the summer, and you were born. Ah, so now I know. I was born in Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av. That is a day in the middle of summer. So now, at last, I know something about myself. So, just a minute. When was exactly the year of this Tisha B'Av? She said, well, it was, you know, the war was over, and the war, now no more war, in the middle of the summer, Tisha B'Av, I don't know, but the day of mourning. But you can't have a birthday on the day of mourning. Not allowed. Now I know. The end of the war was 1945. So 1945, Tisha B'Av, I know exactly the date of my, you know. So I found out that the Jewish calendar and the Christian calendar get together every 19 years. I waited from 1945 until 1964, waiting for the date of birth, that at last I'll know something about myself. And there I am, the 5th of August, 1964. This is my birthday. Now I understand that my birthday is, it says that I'm a lion, I'm a Leo. Now I'm starting to behave like a Leo. I get, you know, I'm a Leo. Then I fall in love as a Leo. I get married as a Leo. I make children as a Leo. I'm a Leo, that's it. One day my mother sits with my wife and she talks to her, and my mother speaks only Yehudi, which is Yiddish. She doesn't speak Arabic, she speaks Yehudi, and she doesn't speak any other language. And my wife arrived from England, and she doesn't speak any other language but English. And they sit down and they talk to each other, and they listen to each other. My mother is very good on yes. And my wife speaks to her, and she said, yes. Well, yes. Yes, 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 yes. She's yesing for about an hour, and then my wife says, here, Yossi was born on Tisha B'Av. And she says, how come? How come? So I said, what do you mean, how come? Mother, you said it was the middle of the summer, and it was day of mourning, and you were fasting. She said, yes. It was Shiv'a Asar B'Tammuz. That is another day of mourning. Now that happens in July. I stopped being a Leo. I became a Scorpion. Now I don't know if I'm a Leo or a Scorpion until one day when we take the kids. We already have got kids, and you know, and I'm still trying to find who I am, what is my identity, and I'm writing one book after the other in order to find another identity. And then we go to a place in Michmoret. It's called Michmoret, and it's not far from Tel Aviv. It's on the sea, and there is a family called Weiss. The family called Weiss, they've got zimmers. They've got, you know, rooms to let. And we come in with the kids, and there is a nice entrance. And at the entrance, there is a woman looking like my mother, but not exactly. And I said to her, hello, can I speak to Mrs. Weiss, please. And she says, yes, what do you want? She speaks like Arabic to me. I said, well, I'll wait for Mrs. Weiss. She said, well, why can't you talk to me? I said, well, you don't look like a Weiss. You look like a bit like my mother. And from our side of diaspora, we don't have those illnesses like Weiss. And she said, what are you talking about here? Do you see this gentleman there? This ginger head. Sure, Abdalak. She talks to him in Arabic. And he answers her in Arabic. But he's not at all. Not Arabic, and he's an Ashkenazi Jew. She said, you see, I got married to this gentleman. He is Weiss. Now I'm Weiss. And then she says, we. Now, when Iraqi woman says we, it's like American women says wow. But Iraqi women are just, exact, so the one W is enough. We. I said, when a woman, in this case, says we, that means she is really happy. Oh, it's simcha gdola. When she says double we, that, be careful. Beware. And then she says 3 times we, that that's it, the end of the world. But she said just one. I said, what happened? You're Yosef. I said, yes, it's me. You were 30 days exactly at the wedding of my sister Simha. I said, you're the sister of Auntie Simha? She said, yes, 30 days exactly. I said, tell me, is Auntie Simha still alive? She said, what are you talking about? Of course she's alive. Here she is. She's here. She's come on holiday. I said, okay, where, could you show her? I want to talk to her. She said, Simha. Here comes Simha. She said, we, Yosef, I didn't see you since your Brit. You haven't changed a bit. Said, Doda Simcha, Auntie Simcha, could you tell me when were you wedded? When was your wedding day? No, don't remind me. No. Ainara. The bed eye. What happened? What? Do you know what you did to me? You know what you did to me at my wedding day? What did I do to you at your wedding day? How could I know what? Your mother. She brought you to my wedding day when you were exactly 30 days old. 30 days! 30 days old you were. You're not allowed to bring a child to a wedding before he's 40 days old. Because you can make a... You can make a divorce. You can give her the bad eye. I said, just a minute. Are you okay now? You're not divorced. And you've got children? Everything is okay? So that's it. The bad eye is gone. She said, you never know. Bad eyes. I said, please tell me, when were you exactly? When did you get married? And she takes her ring off and she looks inside her ring and she says, 5th of September, 1946. I said, 5th of September, minus 30 days, that's it. I'm okay. I'm back to being a Leo. Now I know again, I'm a Leo, hey. But I'm not as old as I thought I was. I wasn't born in 1945. I'm much younger than that. I was born in 1946. I gained a year. I opened the table and come on, I invited all the teamers around. Come on, guys, on me, beers, drink, hey, hook, and everybody's singing to me, happy birthday, new birthday, hey. And there comes Simcha, she said, Yosef, what? What? sorry to tell you, I wasn't wedded in 1946. My wedding was in 1944. At that point, I got older in 2 years, in 1 minute, and I didn't ask anymore about Simcha. I didn't want to know my age. I didn't want to know anything about my age. That's it. Enough. Enough is enough is enough is enough. I went to the Ministry of Interior. I went to the Home Office. I said, that's it. I'm making myself now a new passport. That's it. I got the form. I wrote the date of birth, the 5th of August, 1945. No, says the newcomer from Russia to me. She said, no. I said, what no? She said, no. I said, what no? She said, you don't have a birthday. Your birthday is 0, 0, 0, 0, 45. I wanted to tell her, Madam, 45 is not exactly, but I shut up. And I got an Israeli passport, which I hold until nowadays with a 0, 0, 0, 0. And when I came here now, just 3 days ago, the gentleman looks at my passport and says, what is your problem, man? I said, I don't have any problems. I said, well, your passport says that you have. What is your problem? I said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm a refugee. Oh, how long are you a refugee for? I said, for the last 74 years. He looks at me and says, really? I said, hmm. Now when he opens his eyes, a very good-looking black man, and looks at me, and his eyes are exactly the same eyes as my grandson. Blue, very light blue, which is the color of mixed children from all kinds of places. And I said to him, God, your eyes. He said, what about them? Now, you come to the United States of America, you have to behave yourself, otherwise you'll be thrown out in 1 second. But there I am, I'm glued to his eyes. I said to him, you've got my grandson's eyes. What are you mixed with? He says to me, I was born in a laboratory. I said, God, you look exactly, if I wouldn't have seen the whole of your body, I would have thought that's my grandson. He said, and what is your grandson's name? I said, Tom. He said, Tom? Like Thomas? I said, yes. And he puts his jacket like that and says, that's my name, man. That's my name. Now that is a real story. That's not, I didn't create it beforehand and I never wrote it. I'm telling it live now because it happened to me 3 days ago. Now how could it happen? Working on my identity, I have now 3 children and 10 grandchildren. One looks like Grisha from Russia with blonde hair, straight, blue eyes. The other one has got black hair and blue eyes. The other one looks like a Viennese porcelain, and another one looks darker. And each one of them looks in a different way. And I ask myself, what is my identity still? And when I look at things these days, I understand that we come from the day that King Yehoiachin, which was the last king at the first temple, that just left the land of Israel with all the congregation of the elite of the Jews in Jerusalem in those days, and he left to Babylon without the Kohanim. Without the Kohanim. And he started a new Israel there. And at that time, there were two kings of Israel. One in Jerusalem, Tzidkiyahu. He was a priest, he was a Kohen, which wasn't allowed. It's not allowed. The priests weren't allowed to hold kingdom and to have power. But they broke the law. And they erected a new kingdom in Jerusalem. After a while, he was murdered, Tzidkiyahu. But Yoyachin carried on in Babylon and started a new congregation of Jews that carried on. This congregation never moved from Babylon for the last 2,600 years, 2,650 years. They weren't wandering Jews. They were Jews that lived in one place only. It was called Gola. Yes, diaspora, but it wasn't really the diaspora. It was the center of Judaism in those days. In fact, if there was no Gola in those days, maybe the whole of the Jewish story wouldn't have existed by now. So sometimes we think that the Gola really holds us together. After all, we need the Gola. And the funny thing is that nowadays, when Israel is now a state, and it's like the third temple, at the time, the Jews of Israel were called Am Haaretz. Am Haaretz, the people that lived in Haaretz, in the state. The people of the state. Later on, it became like bad wording, like they were called Am Haaretz, which means, well, they're ignorant, they're arrogant, they're this and that. And the relationship between Babylonia and Jerusalem, the second temple, was really quite conflicted. They were even trying to do the Talmud. From the Talmud Bavli, they wanted to start the Talmud Yerushalmi, and people from Babylonia didn't want to come to Israel, even though they did for them in those days Tur ve'aleh. It's strange to think that the same kind of work that was done then was done just years ago here in Israel, not here, there in Israel, giving the Jews of Babylonia the right to have land in Israel, at the Galilee, and somehow they thought, well, by giving them land, they'll stay in Israel, but they didn't. The Jews of Babylon didn't take part in the second temple at all. They sent teachers, they sent Hillel and others, but they never settled in Israel. When the state of Israel in 1948 started, and Zionism was very, very high in Iraq, the Babylonian Jewry have left Iraq. In 2 years, all the Jewish congregation disappeared. There were only few thousand that were left in Iraq. In 1970, they fled again, those few thousands. Nowadays, there are no Iraqi Jews anymore there. Now, we never studied that in Israel. Our children don't know anything about themselves, about their past, about all the things that did happen to their forefathers. And that's a part of not lechabed et avicha veit imecha that is happening nowadays, unfortunately, in Israel. That people think that the youngsters are right. It's true, they are right, because the future is theirs, but the future without the past doesn't hold much. And when I think of how did we manage, after all, when I come from a family of 10 children myself, and now I'm a grandfather of 10 grandchildren, my father didn't have those two guys that were called parents that were babysitting all day long for their kids, and they had to feed us all. How did we do it? How did we manage? There's a story about this guy that was very poor, that had nothing. And one day, from despair, he decided that he's going to do an act that he didn't allow himself to do before. He said, I'm going to climb on the wall of the palace of the king, and I'm going to go down to the king's palace and let the king do anything he wants with me. I don't care anymore. That's it, I give up. And there he is, deciding, and he comes to the center of the city, and the king's palace is with an enormous wall around it, and he just now puts his fingernails at the wall and starts climbing up and goes up, and he's hungry and he's tired and he's demolished, he's finished. He goes on, and then he gets to the top, and it's all full of pieces of metal and nails, and he pushes himself and he falls onto the grass of the king's court, and he looks around, he doesn't believe his eyes. It's so beautiful. Birds are singing, trees, grass, everything is gold. Now, from the cultural shock that he has, he gets really nervous and he sweats, and his body is all itching, and he puts his back to one of the trunks of the trees, and he just and he scratches his back. Oh, yeah. Now he goes back to the Jewish krechts. Oh, and he closes his eyes and he comes down. Now that he's come down, the king comes to the terrace, and the terrace is all open, and the king comes in with a lot of people around him, ministers, helpers. The king looks at the garden and says, hey, there's someone there scratching his back on my tree. Bring him over. They bring him. Bow. He's bowing. On your knees, man. On your knees. And the king says, what are you doing here? Says, Your Majesty, I'm terribly sorry. And he tells his story to the king from the day he knows himself until that moment of despair when he decided to do something that he shouldn't have done maybe. And he says to the king, and he tells him all the way how he climbed the wall and how he came in. And he says, look, Your Majesty, the fact that I just now scratched my back, it's because I had an itch and I couldn't get there, so I had to lean on your trunk. Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir. Just please give me my life back. Now that I see all this beauty, all this fantastic place that you have, it's good to live. Please give me my life back. Please. The king now is moved, and he thinks, and he looks and says, where is the Minister of Exchequer? Come here. Give him 2,000 dinars. Oh, the guy opens his eyes and says, 2,000 dinars. That's it. It's an amount of money that he never thought it had ever come across. And then they bring him and they clean him. They bring him a whole box of golden dinars. And they bring him out of the king's court now from the main entrance. And he goes back to the place they comes from and says, look, you won't believe it. Until yesterday, I was poor. I was finished. I was homeless. I didn't have anything. But now I'm rich. I've got 2,000 dinars. And he tells everybody the story, exactly what he told the king, word by word. And he tells, now two of his listeners, listen carefully, word by word. The day after, they're wearing, Shabbat clothes, and they come to the wall. They land on the grass, and whoa, what a beauty. Birds are singing, trees. Everything is made of gold. Everyone there's nobody there. So they stand there, put their backs at two trees, and they scratch. And they scratch. And they, nothing. And they carry on, they close their eyes, and then the terrace opens, and the king comes to the terrace and looks and says, what's going on now? There are two people now. What is it, a pandemic? Bring them over. What are you doing here? Your Majesty, we are very, very poor. And they tell the story of their friend, that word by word, exactly like he talked, but not missing one word. And they said, Your Majesty, now that we saw all this beauty, we realize that it's good to live. Please give us our life back, please. Your Majesty, please. Please, Your Majesty. The king listens and thinks, and he says, where is the hangman? Where is the hangman? Come here. Hang them. Each one on each tree that they scratch their backs on. Go on, hang them, hang them. No. Your Majesty, you're wrong. You've got a mistake. You're mistaken. Yeah, but our friend yesterday told the same story, and you gave him 2,000 dinars. Your Majesty, you've got a mistake. You're wrong. I have no mistake. I'm not mistaken at all. Your friend that came yesterday, he was poor. He was on his own. You too. You could have scratched his other backs. And why didn't you do that? We did. In those days where we lived in transition camps, when Israel was a whole 221 settlements of tents all over Israel, from the south to the north, from east to west. Israel was covered with the refugee camps. But we knew to scratch each other's backs. We knew that we have hope. We had nothing, but we had a lot of hope. Nowadays, we're looking at things. Israel is a very prominent country. We live very well, and we really still need hope. And the hope is finding in yourself someone that scratches your back, or if you can scratch someone else's back. Because if you can have just one that can scratch your back, you can't be poor. And if you have the ability to scratch someone else's back, how can you be poor? I have a lot of stories to tell you about my identity. I created my own identity by learning myself, learning my family, my father that died 10 years old, 10 years after he arrived. I said 10 years old, which is 10 years old as an Israeli. When he came to Israel, he was sure that he is an Israeli because he already spoke Hebrew, because he was there and he learned Hebrew in the underground, and they all came knowing that they are all already Israelis, and they were called Iraqis without understanding who they are. I learned my mother's, I learned my forefathers, I learned about the place that I came from. And by then, I gained myself. These books here are part of the books that I wrote. I'm going to donate them to your library and hope that you'll learn some Hebrew in order to read it. And I really do want to thank you all for coming and listening, because when I've been listened to, I received love, because listening is the beginning of love. And if I've been loved by so many people here, I can't be poor, and I certainly can't complain. And I thank you for that. Thank you very much.
Questions that they would like to ask Yossi, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. Oh, please, you're Jews. I know somebody has a question. So first of all, Yossi, I have to say I loved the story about your... Which one? Someone had their hand up? So I love the story about you trying to find out what your birthday was. I still don't know what my father's birthday is. I started a similar journey. I got to a couple of relatives and I got tired and bored. So I'm impressed that you finally actually found out what your birthday was.
I didn't.
Oh, you still don't know?
I still don't know.
Well, with a 000 birthday.
The last one that knew had a Sidur that he used to write the birthday of others. And one day he called me and he said, you weren't born in Tisha B'Av and you weren't born in 1945. You were born in 1946 between Tisha B'Av and Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. So...
With my broken English, I would say thank you. It was Me'alef for me. I will use your family name. Me'alef is wonderful, unbelievable, great. So thank you very much. I think I have an answer about the scratching the back. So I came from Israel 3 days ago, and I did see my nephew who is serving in if you saw Fauda, the Fauda unit. You're not allowed to go in the base. I was outside, but I did see the guys who are scratching the back, and that's where it's come from, in Israel. It doesn't exist here. So thank you very much. It still exists over there.
What would the three Yiddish words, Yehudish, your grandmother said? You never mentioned it. I think perhaps you left that out of the story when you were in the truck or crossing the border.
What did she say to me?
No. You said that she spoke Yiddish.
Yeah.
And that she said 3 words, but I never got the 3 words. Perhaps I'm wrong.
She said top, 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 top. Tob is tov, but we with the bet in the Yiddish we did it with bet dgusha, which means we never said tov, we said tob. We never said zvuvim, we said zbubim. מסתובב, 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 עד שמסתובב לו הראש.
Good, is what she was saying.
I'm not sure I missed this, but how did you become a public storyteller?
When I was a kid, I used to tell stories all the time because that was the only way to get some attention. When you're one of 10, you don't get attention. You really have to work on it. So I used to tell all kinds of stories, and my father would always say to me, listen, can't you just go and come back without a story and without a drama, without something open, something closed, something bent, something. Stop it. And every time I would start a story, they said, shut up. Nowadays, they pay me for that. And the funny thing is that the truth is that I'm regarded to be the head of the community theater in Israel. I was the one that started it in Israel, and it became an enormous thing. And today there are professors of community theater and doctors of community theater, and most of them are my students, my ex-students. And one day, as a director of the theater, I came to one of the communities in Sderot, which is like at the beginning of the Negev. And, you know, with the theater, you want to show off and you want to do all kinds of tricks on stage. And the woman said to me, Mr. Alfi, I came to tell a story. Let me just tell the story and go. For God's sake, I don't want to talk. Just, you know, I don't want all this, you know. Said, okay, tell the story. She sat on the stage and told the story. We all listened, laughed, cried, moved. And then I said, look. And I went back to my students at the television university, and I said, we are wrong. We don't need all these effects. We need the real thing. We need the story. And then slowly it became something that I worked on, and slowly it became something vast today. We have a lot of storytelling clubs in Israel, in every town, and people tell each other stories, not only to tell about themselves. It became an art. It became a form of art for the theater. People now go to the storytelling evenings just as much as they go to the theater. We have a very, very big festival in Israel that goes in Sukkot. Sukkot, in the second temple, there was something that they called Hakhel. Hakhel, which means bring audiences together. And it was in order to make the tribes listen to each other and know each other and get together. And now this festival became the Hakhel of Israel in a way, and we work throughout the year in storytelling. It's a television program that goes on now for the last 30 years, a radio program that goes on for the last 35 years, 36 years, and it goes on and on. It doesn't stop.
Since you were one of the pioneers on this in Israel, did you study in England? Is that where you honed your craft?
I studied in London, at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Arts. One of the students that was with me was John Lithgow. John Lithgow and I were partners. He is 2 meters 10, and I'm 160 minus. And we were very funny together. and we did a lot of shows together, but then he went to America, I went to Israel, and since then, that's it. John Lithgow is a world star, which is great to hear.
Have you got a personal favorite story?
They're all my sons. And as for scratching each other's backs in Israel, it is true. We still, a lot of good people in Israel still do a lot of good work. We have a lot of problems. But let me tell you, I prefer the Palestinians than all the איך אומרים, הסופות הענקיות האלה כאן. I prefer the Palestinians than the tornadoes and all those others, you know. It's less dangerous, even though it is dangerous. And as you know, 2 days ago, it was 2 days ago, I've lost track of time now. 2 days ago, we had a problem there. But, you know, you have Michiganders here that did something terrible a week ago. And really, there are a lot of very, very good people and very good things happening in Israel. It's something that should be helped to carry on. Thing is that we really do still need to find each other. And I'm very glad that I come from a family that now is, in our family we have English, Romanian, Polish, Iraqi, Persian, German, Australian, Libyan, Syrian. We have 12 different countries in just one family with my wife and myself. So that's it. Have a great week, Ken.
Wait, hold on, let me pass the microphone up.
You tell great stories, and you take time and you articulate them and you write them and you write books. And kids today, including myself, like the younger generation, we communicate on Twitter, right? And we communicate with emojis, with pictures. Very different than your way of really telling a story and getting into the depth of it. So what do you think about this new way of communicating with Twitter and Facebook and emojis? Where do you see it heading?
Once upon a time, people wrote on stone. And making a book on a stone would take you years and years and years by working with, with the hammer. And later on it became a cloth, a scroll. The Chinese started with the much earlier with the writing on rice paper. The Egyptians wrote on papyrus, and slowly we came out of it completely. And nowadays we write on fiction words and letters that really are just flying in the air. And in Dublin there is a museum of a poet, and the poet himself, only his voice goes on, and you see the letters flying in the air. But looking at each other in the eye, feeling each other bodily, is something that it's a human need. It's a human need. It's a response. And I do work with a lot of children. I did about 1,500 shows for kids throughout Israel in the last 15 years. And the children are still needing, there is a great need for the personal touch. The emoji is good, and the internet is fantastic, and the fact that we're working now all in really something, איך אומרים, in something that really doesn't exist. The what? In the cloud. Really? Virtual and in the cloud, but it's still there. We do need the personal touch after all.
So Yossi, we have two more questions. One, not virtual, in person, but we also got a question from the virtual world because this is also being live streamed right now. And the question was from the live stream, do any Palestinians participate in any of these storytelling ventures?
Of course. There are two kinds of Palestinians. One, we call them Israeli Arabs. There is no such a thing as Israeli Arab and Palestinians. They're all Palestinians. Some of them are a part of the Israeli history, and the others are away from the Israeli history. There is a lot of contact between us, but not enough. We have to still work on it.
Do you feel that storytelling or venues where people tell each other stories might be one of the avenues to help create peace from the ground up between Jews and Palestinians?
I'm sure of that, and because there is nothing like telling stories to each other. I'll tell you, one day I had a show for Palestinian kids that came to this show, and I went on telling the story, and then one of the kids said, "So what are you? Are you Muslim, Christian, Jewish? What are you?" I said, "I'm Jewish." La wallah. He said, La wallah is the... No, not really, like, no, I can't believe it. I said, "Why can't you believe it?" He said, "But you're too good." I said, "There are so many Jews that are too good like me, I said, "Well, now I understand." This touch, if I'll ask you, who are the teachers that you remember? The good teachers that we do remember, it doesn't matter how old we are. If I'll say now, 1, 2, 3, and at the 4, you'll say to me the name, just the name of the teacher, okay? Remember, 1, 2, 3. I don't hear you. What is the name of your teacher? And your teacher? And your teacher? What is the name of your teacher that you remember? You don't remember any teacher that taught you anything. You just remember teachers that told you stories. The only teachers that you remember are the teachers that did tell you stories, because they left something within you. Because when you tell a story, you have to live it. The difference between talking and telling a story is talking is passing the time. When you tell a story, you hold the time.
So one last question.
Do you try to collect stories when you travel? Are there California stories that you're hoping people will tell you?
I must say that I was busy most of my life working on creating stories or bringing stories from my own history or my forefathers' history. The only book that I did look for stories are the book of Ma'abara, in which I wanted to have people telling me stories about their history, because we never studied it in Israel. Nowadays, I'm going to start a very big project, and we're now starting it, and we know exactly where it's going to happen. It's going to be like the Mayflower Museum in Boston, where you could see and feel and be a part of the actual event of people arriving to America at the 16th century, 17th century, and seeing Indians for the first time and living together with them, and their narrative is told properly from both sides in the Mayflower Museum. I suppose some of you have been there. If you haven't been there, please do go and see it, because it's really something. It's amazing. It's an experience. You see a story happening in front of your eyes. They still speak Jacobean language, which is English, an old English. And when you speak to them, if you say to one of them, television, they look at you like, what? And they live in this place, in this living museum, exactly the same way. We're starting the same thing. We're going to erect a ma'abara, which is transition camp, with all the tents and with all the sheds and everything that happened there. And we're going to have actors acting scenes there. For example, one of the scenes that I can tell you, that my mother gave birth in one of the tents. She came to Israel when she gave birth in Iraq to my sister, and my sister was something like 1.5 years old, and she came pregnant again, because my mother was pregnant most of her life, either before pregnancy, after pregnancy. When you have 10 kids, you're pregnant most of the time. And she gave birth in the tent to my brother that lives now in Los Angeles. I'm sure that if she knew that my brother is going to go to Los Angeles and not stay in Israel, she wouldn't give birth. I don't know. But there you are. You know, life goes on. You never know. And my brother that lives now in Los Angeles knows the story of him being born in a tent. And when they came to help her, they said, well, madam, you have to go to hospital. She said, I'm not ill. I just gave birth. So things like that will be remembered in this museum, living museum.
Let's give a big round of applause. We have a wonderful reception awaiting for us, so for those of you who are too shy to ask a question in front of people, I am sure Yossi will love to meet and greet you as we go through those doors into the courtyard.
I want to thank Matan, I want to thank Mona. Thank you very much, really. Thank you for having me. Thank you.